CashFlow Diary Podcast, episode 208.
Welcome to yet another exciting episode of the CashFlow Diary Podcast, the podcast that teaches you insider tips, tactics, and strategies for creating leverage streams of cash flow into your life. Learn from top-performing entrepreneurs, business owners, investors, and thought leaders from across the globe as they share their secrets to success. Like what you learn on this and other CashFlow Diary podcast episodes? Go to learninvestingnow.com and sign up to receive powerful tips and information that will help you succeed as an entrepreneur and investor. Now, here's your host, investor, entrepreneur, business owner, educator, speaker, author, and master facilitator of Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow game, Jay Massey.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the CashFlow Diary Podcast. I'm your host, Jay Massey, and I'm glad that you are here today because we are going to go down south and introduce you to a gentleman that I have met, but most importantly, a state that you may not be considering. And more importantly than that, we're going to talk about a ton of things as it relates to how to invest, why to invest, and most importantly, some interesting things that you could eventually grow to doing with your investing should you stick it out and make it all the way through. Today's guest is coming to us, as I hinted at, from the South in Atlanta, Georgia. His name is Ken Corsini. He's a full-time real estate investor and host of the Deal Farm podcast. Thanks, Ken, for having me the other day. And he also has done over 600 homes in the metro Atlanta area in the last several years. He's a speaker. He's an author. He's out there writing articles and changing his marketplace. And I have a feeling that you and I are going to learn a lot about what we think we already know, cash flow. Welcome, Ken Corsini. Ken, you there?
I'm here, Jay. Thanks for having me.
How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, man. I'm enjoying some fall weather. I'll tell you what, it's a happy change to the dismal August we had here in Atlanta.
Fall, what? Okay, all right. So let's talk about that. What is fall weather in Atlanta? Because every time I think of Atlanta, the only thing I think of is heat and humidity.
Yeah. So fall weather is probably what you experience all year long in Southern California. We get it for about 2 months, and we enjoy every second of it.
Got it. Well, you know, you can move. It's like, it is like that all the time. But that's awesome. Now, Ken, in the times that you've been involved in real estate, what would you say is some of the things that you think someone who's getting started today needs to know? Like what's that number one thing?
Well, when you say someone's getting started in real estate, I guess my first question is, what does that look? What does that mean? Does that mean you're investing long term? Does that mean you want to be an active player, in the business of transacting homes? So there's lots of different ways to step into real estate. So in the context of maybe long-term real estate investing, maybe that was your question?
Well, sure. That one's fine too, but you actually illustrated the point without answering the question. Is that for me, at least, when I've been working with individuals, one of the most important things is to figure out, what do you want to do? What do you want real estate? What do you want from real estate? And you were already going down that path. And I was curious to see how you would answer that question, honestly, for me, because I was like, does he have that same kind of thought process? Because many of us can want the benefits of real estate investing, and I think many of us do. That's why we're listening. But we're not sure exactly how to go to extract them and what services or tools that we're actually going to play. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that's kind of where I was coming from. Now, let me get to what is my normal first question. Now that I've got my personal question out the way, let me help everybody else. I tend to look at but one of the things though is that I tend to look at today's entrepreneurs a lot like yesterday's superheroes. I believe they have a lot in common because entrepreneurs occasionally get dressed up and, sometimes we put on capes and tights and we think we're special and we go around and save people, from their own mess. But also like superheroes, superheroes started at one day, they were just normal individuals, before they actually went out there and made something happen. Before they got bit by the spider, they were just, possibly a reporter. That all of those things in general. So before the 600 deals, before, going to Georgia Tech, before all the podcast and all of these things, what we want to know is, who is Ken Corsini?
That's a loaded question. Well, you alluded to the fact, that you and me and a lot of the guys in this real estate space, consider ourselves more than just real estate investors. We consider ourselves entrepreneurs.
If not superheroes, but yes.
And maybe, at least my kids think I'm a superhero. That might be it.
Well, that's the important one. That's for sure.
Right, exactly. It's funny. I think I had the entrepreneur gene. I mean, from the get-go. I mean, I literally was in grade school selling the potato chips out of my lunchbox, or going to Sam's and buying candy and selling it out of my locker. Yes. I mean, it's like it was inherent in me to buy low and sell high and try to make a buck wherever I could. So, at my core, I sort of feel like an entrepreneur. At least I got, some of that gene.
Well, I think it's interesting for those that have listened a while, and because I asked that question of nearly everybody, and that is very consistent. We all started selling something, from newspapers to candy, at school as soon as we possibly could. And I just think it's interesting. I think it's really, really funny.
It is. And what's funny is my parents aren't like that at all. But my grandparents were. My grandparents owned apartment buildings and things like that. So I think there is something genetic to it. I think it just happened to skip a generation and land on me.
It's funny you mentioned that. I don't know if it's genetic, because there's no one in my family like that.
Oh, really?
But I happen to be that one, the black sheep, if you will. Kind of funny in that way. So what else got you? Who else is Ken Corsini?
Man, that's a loaded question. Well, I guess at the highest level, I'm my husband. I'm a father. I'm a businessman. I'm a Christian. I mean, I'm a man of integrity. I try to live by my word. Hopefully, that's a good answer to the question.
Yeah, absolutely. So, did you wake up one day and just go, you know what, real estate? That's me. Is that how that started?
It's funny because when we were younger, we didn't move a lot, but we always thought about moving a lot. And so my parents spent a lot of weekends walking through construction sites and houses and neighborhoods. We did a lot of that. I think maybe they got some enjoyment out of that. And having done a lot of that as a kid, I just really liked being around real estate. And so even when I came out of college with a degree in risk management, and I went to work for a Fortune 500 company, and I was doing software, risk management software, and really had a great job, I still had a love for real estate and was listening to Carlton Sheets, trying to figure out, okay, real estate is awesome, and I want to get into this, and I want to make money from this, but I don't know how. So I'm going to learn as much as I can. And so I was listening to CDs and watching DVDs and buying some info courses, and just absorbing as much information as I could, trying to figure out, okay, how do I leave my day job at this, this corporate environment and get into real estate full time? And it took me 5 years before I made the leap in my late 20s into doing this full time. And honestly, I've never looked back.
That's awesome. And just as a side note, for those who might not be familiar, CDs and DVDs are what we used before MP3s and video downloads.
That's right. Yes, it's changed. Yeah.
Here's something that I find that's kind of interesting. You said a degree in risk management?
Yep.
But yet people say all the time, real estate is risky. I would think someone with that kind of background would go the absolutely opposite way.
I think if anything, I learned to identify risk and manage risk, because that's really what risk management is. It's not avoiding risk. It's learning to identify risk and exposures, and then accounting for those and making sure that you've prepared. And so if anything, I feel like that degree and even the experience I had in the workplace has helped me in real estate and making wise decisions.
Agreed. And I figured you would have a unique perspective on risk, considering you spent a lot of time in there. So you said you lasted 5 years in the corporate world. Was that a long 5 years or a short 5 years?
It was probably neither. It was a good 5 years. I mean, So I landed at Marsh & McLennan, which is a very large insurance brokerage.
Yeah.
And they had specific software, risk management software. And almost all of my clients right out of the gates were Fortune 500 clients. So, as a 23-year-old kid, going to Coca-Cola or Vanderbilt University or HC. I mean, all these amazing clients. It was really eye-opening. I really learned how to conduct business and developed a work ethic. Funny thing too, I mean, speaking of being an entrepreneur, on the side, I mean, I'd come home from work and get on my computer and sell porch swings on eBay though too. I mean, so
of course.
I still had I still had to scratch that entrepreneurial bent. But it's funny because I would learn some technology and then come back and be able to implement it, build a website or whatever. So it was still 5 years, it was a good training ground for me just to conduct business and grow up a little bit and develop a work ethic, maybe become a little more technologically savvy before I stepped out on my own.
Well, this brings up an interesting question, considering we'll call it younger start. I get a question a lot from a lot of our different listeners, and it takes various different forms, but at its essence, I get I'm 18 or I'm young, or I'm just finishing college. Can real estate work for me, or will people take me seriously? It's some form of, can I do it because I'm not 60? What would you say to that person who says that?
Man, I'd say absolutely. I think anybody can do real estate because there are so many strategies and entry points and places to plug in that I don't care who you are or how old you are or how much money you have, that there's a place to plug in.
I definitely agree with that one. So tell us about what I like to call, there's a superhero moment. There's that moment where you realize you've got something special, and then you go, okay, I'm going to go no longer be this old person, this old version of who I am, and now we're going to move forward and be this new person and actually open up this business. That time is usually very tumultuous, I guess, is the best word that I can come up with. I'm curious to hear how your transition went.
So I actually was looking for a number of different ways to make my entry point. I was looking at other opportunities to be in business for myself, and I found what they were advertising it as a franchise, and they were out of Seattle, and basically they had all they really did is develop sort of a unique business model where they were partnering potential lease purchase tenants with investors who would buy a house on their behalf. And it was in the mid 2000s. This is 2005. So it was a really interesting strategy because the market, there was no thought that the market was going to tank. I mean, everything was appreciating.
Oh, of course. It only goes up.
It only goes up, right? And so from an investor standpoint, they liked having a built-in lease purchase tenant that put some money down, and a lease purchase tenant that couldn't qualify for financing now had an investor that would sort of bridge the gap for a year or two until they could get financing. And it was a really good model for about, a year and a half, 2 years. And so I actually paid a big chunk of money to basically be a part of this franchise. And the only way I even had the money is because I happened to have built my own house and had some equity in it. So I took out an equity line, bought into their franchise. And I remember sitting at my computer like day one after I'd, really taken the leap. Okay, I got to make this work. And it was just, okay, Ken, you have to bust your butt for the next, year or 2 years. One, to at least get your investment back, but to make this business work. Luckily, we didn't have kids at the time, so I didn't have the pressure of that. My wife was working, so the pressure wasn't horrible. I probably was too young and naive to feel the pressure, truthfully.
Right.
But then, I just hit it hard. I mean, I was on the phone. I was just working. I was working out of my basement, and it was exhilarating. I mean, I literally felt like, have you ever seen that commercial where the entrepreneur sort of unplugs from the line, and it's such a great analogy of unplugging and feeling this just freedom. And even though, I was working harder, I was working more hours, it was just, it was such an exuberance to be in business for myself. And I think just the excitement of it and the adrenaline rush, I mean, I couldn't help but make it work. I mean, I was, you know this feeling. You've been there before.
I do. In fact, I heard it said somewhere that someone defined entrepreneur as someone who's willing to work 80 hours for themselves so that they don't have to work 40 hours for someone else.
Wow.
And
that's good.
I'm like, yep, I get it 100%. But you said something that I think is interesting, and I'm wondering if it's a secret to entrepreneurs' success. is you said you were too young and naive to possibly even feel the pressure. Do you think there's a point at which when entrepreneurs first start, regardless of age, but just the fact that we don't know what we don't know, but we're so darned excited, we'll go and do it anyway?
That's so true. You're right. It's funny because a lot of entrepreneurs are like ready, fire, aim. I don't know if you're the same.
Exactly.
It's like, we're going to do this. We're not even going to analyze it.
Fire. I don't know when my team has to stop me to actually get ready and or aim. Those I fire very fast.
Yeah, but that's a trait of entrepreneurs. Is like, let's just do this. Let's start. I mean, the speed of implementation.
Exactly. Many people have heard me say at least once, move at the speed of instruction, and that's kind of where I come from. It's like as soon as the idea has been hatched, it's time to execute.
That's so funny. I'm guilty of that as well.
Well, of course. So at what point do you realize? I mean, you could have chosen anything, to go out there and how to build your business, but you chose. You was like, you know what? Risk management isn't for me, but real estate is. Was that like a natural thing for you, or did it? Was it? What went into that decision?
Well, so interestingly, I actually had an opportunity to go open my own Chick-fil-A. So in the South, Chick-fil-A's
whoa! Wait a minute. You said no to Chick-fil-A?
I mean,
dude.
So I worked for Chick-fil-A all through high school.
Oh my God!
They were one of my clients at Marsh, so I knew. I knew the corporate office. Like I was a shoo-in. I mean, they were ready to give me a store. And it was really, honestly, it came between, okay, do I want to do real estate or do I want to do this? And I love the idea of having my own store and growing that business, but I fell in love with real estate. I mean, I knew that's what I wanted to do. And there's probably a little bit of a ceiling, when you open a store. And I saw real estate as there really is no ceiling. I mean, it's sort of limitless. There's really no confines. There's no structure. It's like the sky's the limit.
Wow.
And so I went towards real estate, and I'm glad that I did. I mean, for all those reasons.
For those of you who don't know, if I'm not at Starbucks, I'm probably at Chick-fil-A.
Oh, really? And there's not that many in Southern California, are there?
No, and I know exactly where each and every one of them are. That's what great. I'm trying to tell you. It's like, hilarious. Oh my God, I love that place. I mean, it's just, there's never a bad day for Chick-fil-A, except Sunday, of course.
That's right, when they're not open.
Which is like the one time sometimes I will go on a Saturday because I know I can't go on Sunday. I will just know because I know I'm going to want it on Sunday. So let me go ahead and go today so that way I can get it out of my system. Anyway, all right, I digress. But I think, Chick-fil-A, that probably wouldn't have been too bad either, but I agree with you. Awesome. So what was the deciding factor then between those two?
It was for all those reasons. Just that I knew it's the sort of the sky's the limit opportunity where you could go in so many different directions. And funny enough, so I had literally bought a course from Carlton Sheets at a garage sale. It had never been opened for like $10. Like the course retailed for, I don't know, maybe $1,000. I bought it for $10. And I wore out those CDs, going back and forth to work, just listening and absorbing it. And it's one of those things, like the more I listened to it, the more I was like, this is what I want to do. This sounds amazing. I love what I'm hearing. And so honestly, Carlton Sheets, believe it or not, is what really helped me fall in love with real estate. Now, granted, his practices are a little outdated. Some of the no money down principles. Right. It didn't matter though. I knew that's what I wanted to do.
Well, what I like about that, though, and I hope everybody picked up from that, you didn't listen to it once and go, okay, cool. It wasn't a check mark. I got that. I don't need to listen to it again. It was repetition over time is what it takes. I mean, many times we hear or you see things where, this weekend only will teach you how to be a real estate investor in 30 minutes or less. And by the way, you'll have an internet business to boot. And I just think the expectation of being able to become a real estate investor in that length of time is just false. And yet there are many times we're looking for that quick solution, and you were going down the dedicated solution. But you brought up something else that I think is interesting on this path, on this journey. These are like some of the obstacles in the way for entrepreneurs. Is you said, and it's true with real estate, there are so many entry points. There's so many different directions. To a point, do you think that because there are so many choices, because there's so many ways and so little structure to it, that there are just too many choices for someone to actually figure out how to get started?
Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. That's like the name of the game, trying to figure it out in so many different ways. I mean, I know the challenge when you're first getting started in real estate investing, everything looks like an opportunity. And even more so as you go to that next seminar, listen to that next podcast, read that next book. Heaven forbid, should someone bring to you a strategy you had never heard of before, or say something to you like, hey, did you know you could buy a cell phone tower? Suddenly you're like, whoa, what else do I not know? And the answer is a lot, because there's a lot of opportunity out there, to be quite honest. And you're going to continue learning that as we continue speaking here with Ken. I just wanted to step in here really fast and acknowledge the fact that, yes, I know this is not one of our $100,000 per month episodes. We will pick those up here shortly, but I had to bring you the great Ken Corsini, because as I said, I've met Ken before, and I know that the information that he's sharing with you is going to be helpful. And you can see one of the most important things to understand, especially if you are the one wondering, where do I get started? Just get started, because where you start is not necessarily where you will stay. Let's get back to Ken.
That's a great point. What they call it, the now a paralysis of analysis. I mean, you think about it so much, and you got so many options that you don't commit to one. And for me, it worked out really well for me because I was able to plug into sort of an existing system.
Right.
But for somebody that's just sort of potluck trying to figure out what do I do if I want to get into real estate, I could see, absolutely, how somebody would potentially get paralyzed just thinking about all the different ways they could do it. I mean, honestly, even in my business, sometimes I'm presented with so many opportunities to go down this road or go down that road. I have to really, a lot of times, consider, okay, what's going to be the highest and best use of my time if I commit to this or to this. It's important, but at some point you have to pull the trigger. You have to say, okay, I've analyzed these options. Here's the best one. Now I'm going to commit to it.
Indeed. There has to be that choice point, and I agree with you. I think one of the interesting things is that oftentimes, especially when we're first starting, we could be chasing the dollar, just looking for any deal, and we're like, oh, here's a short sale, and then, oh, here's a foreclosure. Oh, I can do an auction. Oh, but wait a minute, over here is some vacant land. And going and trying to go in all of those directions, we we don't get anywhere. So,
that's right.
So, but I have to ask you the challenging question: how does one choose? How do you choose which one to follow and which one to? Because you are consciously making a decision. I see an opportunity over there. Somebody's going to make some money or provide some value or something, but you are consciously saying, nope, not that one.
Yeah. It's funny. It's a lesson I had to learn over time. I mean, even early on, especially when I stepped out early on, I chased a few other little, like you said, little business here. It's like it's the squirrel mentality. You see a squirrel, you're like, squirrel, and you're chasing something that has nothing to do with what you're doing, and you just wear yourself thin, and you don't do anything really well. And it was probably the first 2 years that I was in business, kind of working under this franchise before they went out of business, where I did that. I chased my tail a little bit. And then learned that. I really learned that lesson. Okay, Ken, you can't do 10 things really well. You really need to hone in on one or two and not get distracted and do them really well.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just, you have to make some mistakes to learn that lesson.
Well, and speaking of mistakes and setbacks and challenges, you just briefly mentioned that the franchise, how you got started, they went out of business. So you were now at another inflection point and had to make a choice.
That's right. Yep. Late 2007, 2008, right around the time of the collapse. And
I think everybody went out of business right then.
Everybody went out of business, especially if you were in real estate, man, you were reeling. I'll tell you, the one blessing for me is that I had not acquired a bunch of real estate, because I sort of was the middleman in that model. More of I would get contracts and assign them. So all these people in my market that had acquired all this real estate, well, they were stuck. They were upside down. They were losing their shirts. People are getting foreclosed left and right. And luckily for me, I'd sort of gotten my education in real estate at this point, but wasn't at a point where I was going to lose, a lot of real estate. I wasn't behind on mortgages or upside down. So the timing for me actually just worked out really well. All of a sudden, real estate was on sale, and all the, what would have been competitors were going under. And I sort of had the pick of the litter. And that's really what launched my turnkey business. So in 2008, that's where we said, okay, we know how to sell to investors, and let's figure out how to renovate properties and buy them foreclosed. And that's really and it's funny, I think I thought I invented turnkey. Turns out I didn't. There's people in every other market doing the exact same thing. But that's really what launched me into the whole turnkey model in Atlanta, where we're buying distressed houses, fixing them up, putting tenants in place, and then selling them to investors as a cash flowing asset. And that's really been my primary business model for the last 8 years.
Well, what I think is interesting about that, and I hope everyone picks this up, where you start isn't necessarily where you stay. And
totally.
And it sounds like the most important thing you gained, because the funny thing, the more you keep talking, the more our stories are like the same. It's because I started out as a wholesaler too, and all I was doing, was a couple hundred houses, and then I'm like, I think I want to keep some of these.
Exactly.
That was my switch. It was just, I want to keep some of these, but you still used the same skill sets you had before, and you just added new skill sets to it and became something different. So how important has it been for your business to be able to recognize these changes, and more importantly, still find a way to provide value in the ever-changing marketplace?
Man, I think that's been the most important component to our success, is figuring out how to adapt to market changes. Because, you're in a market that changes. I'm in a market that's changing. It's amazing the cycle we've been through in just 8 years.
Right.
Every year it's something. Every year there's a big shift or a change, it feels like. And so for us, staying on top of that and watching what's happening and sort of predicting, okay, we need to get good at this because here's where the market's going. I think that's the only reason we're still in business and still successful.
Yeah, and we have this whole election thing coming up in the not too distant future. Mm-hmm. That's likely to change yet again. So you said for the past 8 years, you were working under this current business model of turnkey investing, et cetera. Tell us a little bit about that. And is that what you're planning on doing in the future?
So that's been our primary business model for the last, 7-8 years. Really in the last year, again, so the market's shifting in Atlanta. The market's really recovered is really what it is. There's just very, very little inventory where, for the first 6-7 years in that business, we could pick our inventory up very easily right off of HUD Home Store or the MLS. Well, a little company called Blackstone and Colony Capital came into Atlanta and literally just changed the marketplace. They bought everything. Everything that we were buying now went to these hedge funds that were willing to pay a lot more. And simultaneously, foreclosures dried up. And so our inventory just went away. So, here you are, you're an investor in Atlanta. You got to figure out how you get your inventory. And so our business model had to change as a result of that. We couldn't just pick off the easy, turnkey houses anymore. And so really in the last year and a half or to 2 years, we've become more of a turnkey, but also wholesale, also retail, also new construction company. We do a little bit of everything. Not to say that we're spread thin, we're chasing a bunch of different things, because really it's one acquisition model for the most part. The thing is, when we acquire a property, we have to look at it through every different lens. Okay, is this property going to make sense from a turnkey perspective? Okay, if not, does it make sense from a retail perspective? Okay, if not, can we wholesale it? So it's the same house. It basically sort of falls through our grid of, okay, where does this house fit into our model? And so where we were doing 100 turnkeys a year, now we're probably going to do 40 to 50 turnkeys and, 40 to 50 wholesale and another 20 retail. It's just a different product mix at the end of the day.
Totally understood. And for those of you who didn't catch that, Blackstone is not a little company.
You're a very large company.
Not at all. Not at all. However, you speak to something that I think, and I know this has been, I hear it all the time, especially out here, how inventory is gone. Oh, the market, and people, we can point fingers. We can go, those people bought up all my inventory, so therefore my business is gone. I hate them, and we start pointing fingers, but yet that's not a decision that you did. You said, okay, well, if that's what I'm being given, let's adjust to that. How has this, I'll call it neuroplasticity, this ability to change, even what you thought you were going to be doing? Because it's not like we want to change every 30 seconds. We just kind of have to and be open to it. How have you maintained your ability to be open to changing your business as the market changes?
Well, I think it's just a realization that if you don't change, you're going to become irrelevant and your business goes away. If the houses aren't there to buy, then you just shut your doors. So for us, it was, okay, the houses aren't there that we used to buy. They're not on MLS. We can't get them on HUD Home Store. So what are we going to do? One of the big things that I attribute to being able to adapt over the last years is I joined a mastermind group of other really highly successful real estate investors around the country. And that's been very helpful and eye-opening for me. Okay, what are other guys doing in other markets that are working? And I've just been able to siphon a ton of experience and information and education from other guys that are really going through similar scenarios in other markets. And that's huge to my success.
Got it. And now I need you to do me a favor, Ken, because there's a number of people listening, and so that I don't get 400 emails, you got to tell us the details about this mastermind group.
So a mastermind in any setting or capacity is usually, it's a group of people that are in a similar industry that come together to just share knowledge more than anything else. So they're critiquing each other, they're sharing information. My group is called the Collective Genius. It's I think there's about 80 guys in the group from all around the country. A lot of names I'm sure you'd recognize. We come together 4 times a year, and basically it's a very large round table where one person takes a turn at a time presenting in front of the group, and the group gives them feedback. And then that person also shares what's work. Basically, sort of opens their playbook and said, "Here's what's working in my market and in my business." And it's very much an abundance mentality. There's not a lot of competition. It's more of, let me share with you what I'm doing to help you become better, and you're going to do the same for me. And in exchange, our businesses are going to grow. And it's been extremely fruitful for my business.
Okay. That way people don't try to track me down. Hey, Jay, where is it now? Because now they know. Because I saw that coming. I saw that email coming as soon as you said it. So with all of these changes, being able to open yourself up, being able to find these new ideas, it sounds as though you would be a proponent. I guess the learning really doesn't stop.
Oh gosh, no. Yeah, the learning. Absolutely. The learning has to continue just in the sense that you're living in a changing environment. I mean, look at technology. Look how much technology's changed in 2 years, in 3 years. I mean, simple things like just staying up on top of technology to stay relevant, and social media and marketing. I mean, think of how much marketing has changed in such a short period of time. In any business, you become irrelevant if you don't stay educated.
Well, all I'm going to say on that is 2 years ago, I did not have a podcast.
Well, there you go. Perfect example.
That's all I'm going to say right there. So what you had mentioned that, you know, a lot about what you've been doing. So do you see yourself pivoting in the future based upon current market conditions? Where are you guys headed now?
So we're continuing to do a lot of it's off-market marketing. I'm not sure if I've mentioned that. So again, we were buying everything MLS, HUD Home Store. Now we've tried to become experts in off-market marketing. So finding houses to buy that are not advertised for sale. So motivated sellers, people that want to sell but haven't listed their house. So we do a lot of tons of postcards and signage and other types of advertising to get the phone ringing. And then you'll learn we spend a lot of time just learning how to acquire off-market properties. So we'll continue to do that. That's really right now for the foreseeable future. that is our business, is off-market properties. And we'll continue to wholesale, we'll continue to retail and do some new construction. But we're also now at an interesting pivot too, where I think we are getting into lending, private lending. And one of the things I've learned is that I can't find every good deal out there. I just can't. And there's so many other people that are stumbling across good deals all the time that there's an opportunity to leverage just a large variety of people and circumstances that can acquire good properties. So we're going to get into lending, and it's going to be nationwide. Granted, we love the South, the Southeast, and Atlanta, but it's going to be nationwide. And not just lending, but also partnering. I really like the idea of people, especially somebody young and new and fresh that finds a good deal that doesn't know what to do with it or doesn't have the capital to put it together, where they can come to us and we'll partner with them on the deal. We'll bring the capital and a little bit of the expertise, and then we'll sort of share in the spoils together. So that's really the pivot point we're at right now, is just deploying capital into the marketplace.
Excellent. That sounds like you're going to get a few phone calls. I can hear it already. So with all of that being the case, do you think that, the seasoned investors eventually become lenders?
It's funny. Some do. I have seen that. That's sort of a progression for investors. Not everybody, but as an investors acquire capital and want to put it to work, a lot of them, diversify by getting into private lending and whatnot. We've partnered with some existing money out there, so it's not just our money, but we've got a pretty healthy chunk to deploy, which is going to take some effort on our part. But I'm super excited about it. I just think there's so much opportunity out there, even outside my market, that I'm excited about the opportunity just to tap into that.
I know it's interesting because occasionally we get the question, Jay, why do you guys do this? Why do you help other people, get into real estate, et cetera? Aren't you creating your own competition? I'm like, there's too many people to house, and too many businesses need a place to stay, too many amusement parks and retail stores and all this other stuff for that to ever happen. Yeah. And I think your abundance mentality in that sense serves you well, because then you can find you're open to seeing another way to provide value in the marketplace. So let's ask this question. If you, knowing what you know today, if you had to start over, but you still, you've retained all the knowledge that you've got right now, what would you say has been the value of your errors and judgments and or mistakes?
Wow. So if I could go back in time and sort of take the lessons I've learned over the last 8-10 years and redeploy them. Yep. I mean, there's so many lessons I've learned, not even about what not to do, but how to do it. It's a ramp up period. I mean, for the first so many years, but I didn't start out doing 100 deals a year. I mean, it was 20 deals, and then the next year might have been 30 deals, and then the next deal might have been 40. So every year I gradually increased. I mean, if I could go back 8 years in time, I'd come out of the gates, doing 100 deals. I'd go out there and, raise the private capital. I didn't know how to do that out of the gates. Finding off-market deals, I didn't know how to do that out of the gates. Finding investors took a while to, figure out how to do that on a larger scale. And so for me, I think I could go back in time and sort of snap my fingers and have Insta business where, it was just, it took time and experience to grow to that.
I like Insta business. That we're going to, we're right there. We're going to go get that URL right now. Instabusiness.com.
Yeah. I copyrighted that, by the way, just when I said it.
Totally. That's funny. But no, you're actually getting to the point where I was headed was, I think, one of the things that limits most people when it becomes, real estate investing is not understanding two things. And I want to get your perspective. Number one, I think real estate business is one of the easiest from a conceptual standpoint. Everyone gets it. But I think the thing that's in the way for most real estate investors or would-be real estate entrepreneurs is the fact that it is one of the few businesses that requires the most number of relationships to even execute one transaction.
Good.
And then the second thing is the at some point, I don't care who you are, you run out of your own resources and the skill sets that you just mentioned. Learning how to, because I call it dealing seller direct. That's what I like to be. I like to be seller direct. It's the only thing I really know how to do is to deal seller direct and find private capital, because my story required me to start dealing seller direct and finding private capital. I had no other way to get in this game. And it's where, but the more I talk to more real estate people, the more I find that's where everybody ends up. That they end up having to learn those skill sets. And I find it interesting, your perspective on that, is given that that's not quite you're like, that's the skill set that I'm using now to do all these great things. But yet the mentality often from real estate investors, especially beginning entrepreneurs, is I need to do it all myself.
Yeah. It's funny because it even took me a little while to come around to even joining a mastermind, because you feel there's a sense of self-sufficiency that I can do this myself, man. I'm rocking and rolling here in Atlanta. I don't need anybody's help or input. And eventually, I came around, man, there is nothing like relationships in real estate. There's no equal in terms of having the ability to leverage up your success, and relationships in terms of capital, even competitors. What I would consider my biggest competitor in Atlanta is a friend. We do business all the time. I had to get beyond that. That's only really been in the last year or two that I came to. I didn't want to know anybody else in Atlanta. I just wanted to put my head down and just do real estate. But I've come to learn that those relationships pay off big time. Even if you're competitors, you end up being friends and doing business together, throwing each other deals back and forth. Right. And it really is the way to leverage up your business, is to see everybody that's in your space as a potential business partner.
I like that 100%. 100%. So that I know there's a number of people listening right now who probably have reached the point of, okay, how do I track Ken down? I want to take advantage of what he's talking about. And there's probably a few that are even interested in the great state of Georgia. So how can they find out what you're up to? Where can they track you down at? What's their next step?
So the easiest place to point people to would be our website, which is dealfarm.net. And so Deal Farm is our podcast. It's actually called The Deal Farm. If you wanted to listen to the podcast, you could see it online at dealfarm.net. But you could also just go to iTunes and punch in Deal Farm. You'll find our podcast there. We're on Facebook. Same thing. You just search for Deal Farm. If you are interested in properties in Atlanta, more specifically, you could go to our website for Georgia Residential Partners, which is gainvesting.com, and check out our properties there as well.
Excellent. So as we wind down here, one final question. Now, as I've mentioned before, there are a number of people who are probably considering getting involved in real estate investing. They're probably looking at getting started, but let's pretend for a second that they're standing in front of the superhero outfit store. They're about to pick up their cape. They think, they have their colors of their outfit solidified. However, in the back of their head, they still have that voice, and the voice because you've heard it. It's that voice that continually speaks up every time you think you want to step forward into greatness. It's that voice that comes up every time you're like, man, I've never done this before, but I know it's possible. But that little annoying, consistent voice is there. Ken, what would you say to that person right now?
Man, I would say if you've assessed the risks and you've assessed your strengths and what you're good at, and you've honed in on a strategy that you're confident will work, then there is nothing holding you back, and you won't regret it for 1 second. I don't for 1 second regret getting into real estate. It's been one of the best decisions I ever made. Nice.
Well said. I love it. I definitely thank you for taking the time to invest with us here, your knowledge and expertise here at the Cashflow Diary.
Thanks for having me, Jay.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you know what time it is. It's time for you to move at the speed of instruction. What does that mean today? That means, why don't you go over to Deal Farm? Why don't you go over to Georgia Residential Partners? Because you know that you're like, man, I'm looking for a way. I need a turnkey property is possibly waiting for you. And then you have the ability to get started beginning to build your portfolio in a state that I happen to do think is great, by the way. So make it happen. Get started. What are you waiting for? I have no idea, because now you have no excuse. You know, Ken. It's been fun talking to you guys today. I look forward to talking to you soon. Until next time.